the 6th chapter. We had done the first 11 verses. Do I need to talk like this? I'm not used to being wired. In the first 11 verses in chapter 6, last week I mentioned that it seems like, Paul's talking about we shouldn't have lawsuits among our brothers. We should appoint a council of judges or what have you within the local congregation. And many times, not just here in Corinthians, Paul has mentioned several times that don't take issue with your brother. If he sues you, stay out of the pagan court. We shouldn't parade Christ in the pagan court. That's a disservice to our Lord. Well, then we get down at chapter 12, or not chapter 12, verse 12. Excuse me. Everything is permissible for me, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible for me, but I will not be mastered by anything. Food for the stomach, and the stomach for food. But God will destroy them both. The body is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. By his power, God raised the Lord from the dead, and he will raise us also. Do you not know that your bodies are the members of Christ himself? Shall I then take members of Christ and unite them with a prostitute? Do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body? For it is said, the two will become one flesh. But he who unites himself with the Lord is one with him in spirit. Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a man commits are outside his body, but he who sins sexually sins against his own body. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore honor God with your body. In this whole chapter 6 right here, and especially down through these latter part of the verses there, Paul seems to almost be renouncing himself of his apostle, of being an apostle. He seems to be. He doesn't want to take the Corinthians to law. I mean, it's a known fact that Paul was an apostle. But the Corinthians seem to be arguing against him for some reason. And last week I mentioned that there seems to be a letter that was written before 1 Corinthians that was addressing an issue that they had written to him about, and they misunderstood it. And now 1 Corinthians here is trying to address everything that they didn't fully understand. So as a way of telling them, talking to them, admonishing them, teaching them, he is sort of renouncing his apostle, being an apostle. Because as an apostle, he should have certain benefits, shouldn't he? They should provide for him. There should be food prepared for him. Now can you hear me? Okay. I must have hit it. Sorry. When we're talking about eating meat, this is the meat that was sacrificed in the temple. Anything wrong with doing that? The meat that is sacrificed in the temples was to false gods. It's just meat. We can eat it. There's nothing wrong with it. We didn't make the sacrifice. Others who believe in that false god made that sacrifice. To them, that is food sacrificed to their god. So there's nothing wrong with us eating that meat. But the Corinthians seem to think, well, if that's true, what happens about sexual activity? The temple of Aphrodite, 1,000 sacred prostitutes. Well, I mean, that's the reason why I was saying this, is that that's the way they were thinking. I mean, it's hard for us to imagine back in that time and being in that circumstance and accepting what they are thinking and believing. But at the time, yeah, a little bit later on, we're going to talk about women with veils. Now, these prostitutes, they forego that veil. That was a symbol to them to say, look, I am a prostitute. Some of them even shaved their heads as a means of advertising in the marketplace that, look, I'm a prostitute. You can approach me. Now, is it correct in thinking that some of these Corinthians were thinking this, that if meat sacrificed to idols is okay for us to eat, then what about being with these women? There seems to be something there. Does that make pardon? Yes. That's true. That's exactly it. That's for the song leader. I don't want to touch that. I don't know why that keeps doing that. I got Dunlop's disease. My belly done lopped over my belt. So I can't tell where. There. How's that now? Better. When you try to look at a lot of these things, that's some of the words that I come up with. Impure speech. What's that? Profanity. Lying. Taking the Lord's name. I have heard a few sermons, and they've got up, they talked about thy words. Gosh, darn, shoot. Don't we use it? This is a polite way of me cussing, isn't it? Isn't that all it really is? Because we all know what those words were standing for. So it's a polite way of, in mixed company, saying things. We want to be forceful with our words. So we use these words, these bywords. Is it wrong to use bywords? I think ultimately you'd have to concede, yes, it is wrong to use those words. But it's awful hard. I've been a member in the church for 45 years, 46 years now, and I've heard quite a few people use those words. I mean, you spilled your papers. Pardon? In the church. Haven't you? Sad to say, yes, we have. We need to clean up our act. Now, I'm not trying to bind something that it's not, been bound, but we're not supposed to have impure speech. But isn't those bywords, aren't they impure speech? I know they know what I mean. And I've always said cussing is it's a weak mind trying to be strong. I'm trying to impress upon you, I am really tough. I'm strong. Why do I need those words? Why don't I use the English language just to say what I need to say? We're in the world. And you're going to hear it from everybody else that's outside the church. Unfortunately, it influences us. That begs the question, why aren't we influencing them to clean up their language? That begs that question, doesn't it? Yes. Okay. It, ke- it keeps going on and off. Okay. Wow. I know it's loud. Thank you. That would cause me to leave. But Paul is saying, okay, I'm a single man. It's better. I can better serve God because my focus is on Him. I don't have the distraction of having a woman with me. Does that make sense? Now, I'm not saying anything bad against the woman. But that is what happens. Glad you had that because I couldn't see it. Yes. Supposedly. There's a lot. That's the way a lot of denominational churches have done, is that this is better service to God because you don't have two masters. You're not trying to please your spouse. Because stop and think. If it comes down to something, you got the church telling you one thing, but your wife's telling you something else. Who are you going to please? Who will you more than likely try to please? And we can't serve the two masters. So either you're going to have a fight with your wife or you're going to have an issue with the church. And which do you want to serve? That becomes the problem. And that causes a lot of heartache and headache within families. Yes. I agree with you 100% on that because we use words, and I try to be careful in what words I use because I might say church, I mean the called out. I don't mean this building. When I talk to somebody outside this building, the unlearned, so to speak, and I say the church, they have no idea what I'm talking about. They think this building. It's like what I talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago when I was teaching 7th grade Bible down at Arlington Christian Schools. A student gave me a Bible that was missing several pages. I took it, threw it in the trash, and got him another one and handed it to him. Now, they're supposed to bring their own Bibles and buy it. The class, all 27 of them, because I took the holy Word of God and threw it in the trash. This is a book, people. It's for our learning. It's a tool. What happens if you break your hammer? You throw it away and you get a new one, don't you? Isn't that what we should be doing? This is a tool for us. It should be well worn. It should be used. Now, you go to somebody's house and you see a brand new Bible sitting there, you know it's never been used. What good has it done those people? That's the reason why I try to be careful, and I hesitate an awful lot because I don't want anybody to stumble because of what I say. I try to be careful in using the right words that I think everybody would agree on. But at the same time, I do say things that are a little bit controversial in thought because I'm still learning. I'm only 70 years old. I've still got a lot of learning to do. Okay? And I hope everybody's the same way. Do I know all the answers? No. And I don't even pretend to. You don't know all the questions either. That's right. But I mean, I try to throw out things to stimulate your thinking, to get you to, wait a minute, I don't like what he said there. Go home and study it. And then when you find what it is that disturbs you, come back and tell me. I find that difficult for me to understand. Paul's letters, they're all difficult. It's difficult for us to assimilate some of his passages. That doesn't excuse us from reading it, studying it, and praying about it. We have to do that stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That would be wrong. No, it hasn't. To be a nun in the Catholic Church, you become the bride of Christ. You serve him. You don't marry. To be a priest in the Catholic Church, you serve God. You're forbidden to marry. Where in the Bible does it forbid you to marry? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we have to be very, very careful. And that's the reason why, you hear me, I'll start going on something, and then you'll see me hesitate because I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong thing the wrong way and give you the wrong idea. And I don't mean to do that. I'm not trying to do that, not purposely. What does unmarried mean? You ever think about that? Not married. Then, now I read in a lot of the verses, he talks about virgins, he talks about married, he talks about unmarried. There seem to be three distinctions. Virgin, never been married. Married, well, that's obvious. So unmarried seems to mean they had been married one time. Or it appears to me that would seem logical. Does that seem logical to y'all? Unmarried would seem to indicate, when you see the word unmarried, and more times than not, that probably means they might have been married and they're a widow, widower. Would that seem fair to say something like that? Now to the unmarried and the widows I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried as I am. Yep, that seems to say it. Yeah. Okay, what happens then that you're in a marriage, you get a scriptural divorce. Now you're no longer married, are you? Your spouse dies. You're no longer married. You're unmarried. You're unmarried, but you're also virgin. Well, I'm trying to not say that, but you're right. Supposedly, you're virgin. Yes, supposedly. Okay. I'm not distinguishing either way. I'm not distinguishing either. Yeah, when we hear those words, they immediately think the female. Yeah. Well, I remember back in the 50s and 60s when I was going to school, I had a speech impediment. I could not say any word that started with an M. Now, you remember in class back in the 50s and 60s, you raised your hand. Mrs. Green, I've got a question. I couldn't do that. There's no way. I couldn't get that M out. So what I would do is I'd be sitting there, and I'd build up. And after a minute or two, I can get out, Mrs. Green. Then my hand shot up. That's the only way I could ask the question in class. And I know some of my fellow students, even the teacher, who is making that sound? Stop it. I never did, but I mean, it was embarrassing. It was difficult. So I had that speech impediment. I couldn't say Mrs. And then, lo and behold, here the 70s comes. Mrs., Miss, Ms. I got confused. And nowadays, what are we talking about today in society? I'm male, I'm female, I'm something. I mean, there's no two sexes anymore. And somebody said they counted up, now we're up to 37 different sexes. And still climbing. Tell me, this is society telling us what's going on. Like when I started the class, I told you my degrees are in physics and math. And I absolutely do not accept the idea of macroevolution. Are we better than what our parents were? We live a little longer. We live healthier. We're more active. That's microevolution. Now, I can accept that. As an astronomer, when I take a look at the numbers and the courses I've had, they always start off like we're in the Milky Way galaxy, right? 100 billion stars, up to about 400 billion. Notice the number I'm using, billion. That's a lot. Now, you take a picture of the sky right there, and you start counting the galaxies that are in there, you come up with, I'll just use a number, 10,000. Well, that's that little circle there. Cover the whole Earth all around it. They say there's 100 billion galaxies in the universe that they can see. Now, 100 billion galaxies. Think about that. Each one of them, now I'm going to assume, notice I said I'm going to assume, our galaxy is just like any other galaxy. We're average. 100 billion stars, 100 billion galaxies, multiply the two, you got 10 to the 18th power possible suns out there of what we think we can see. Now, if we look towards the core of the Milky Way galaxy, there's a huge, dense cluster of stars. You can't see through it, so we assume. But the funny thing is, you never hear astronomers tell you that. We're making assumptions. What do the evolutionists do? Well, over billions of years, man has progressed from the single cell all the way up to the lizards that walked on the land first, and finally the apes, of which we have descended from. Now, given billions of years, is that a possibility? The scientists, yes. The scientists, yes. But they use these huge numbers that people can't grasp and get a hold of. It staggers the mind. It hurts us. So what's the truth? When I taught astronomy, I was forbidden by Indiana law from teaching the Bible. I could not teach creation. I gave the 5 most current methods of how the universe started. And every time I gave them a theory, I showed them why that theory is wrong. For all 5. At the end of class, somebody always asked me, well, what is the correct theory? And I said, I can't teach you that. See me after class, one-on-one. And they would come and ask me, and I'd say, you got a Bible? Go to Genesis 1. There's the one thing that'll give you all the answers right there. But by law, I cannot stand up here and tell you Genesis 1 is the only correct answer. It answers everything. There's some in our brotherhood that teach that day theory. Each day that God gave, he didn't mean what he said. He meant that one day was 1 billion years. Well, if that's true, then we are, because the earth is only 4.5 billion years old, we're on 4.5 days. We haven't been invented yet. We haven't been discovered. We haven't been created. No, what I mean by that theory is that one day is 1 billion years. The next day might only be 900 million. The next day is 700. They come up with it. Why do we lie to ourselves? Why do we teach ourselves this and allow this to be taught to us? This is what the kids of today are being taught. Evolution. Now, I hate to admit it. My training, yeah, I was going to be an astronomer. But it's awful hard to take some of those classes and use those big, huge numbers, because one person I heard say, numbers never lie. Liars number. There's a lot of truth in that. Stop and think. The evolutionists use it. Some of the people that are against creation, they use those huge, huge numbers. And they try to persuade you with their logic. That's the reason why you hear me asking you, does this seem fair, what I'm saying and what I'm doing? Because if it doesn't, please let me know where I'm wrong. Help me find in the Bible where it's wrong. You come on down, we got down to verse 9, verse 10 through 11. To the married I give this command, not I, but the Lord. A wife must not separate from her husband, but if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. And a husband must not divorce his wife. We're always taught here in the church. We get married. We become one flesh, right? Okay. Should we ever get divorced? Pardon? Scripturally. Only for adultery. Does that mean if one of the two commits adultery, you get a divorce? No. We should try to reconcile between the both of us. Try to stay married, if you can. And if you can't, then scripturally, you have grounds for a divorce. Back in John 4, Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman. He's at the well. She comes to draw water. He said, give me something to drink. And she was asking him, you're a Jew. How can you ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? And it goes on, and then he finally says, okay, I'm the living water. And she said, give me so that I might drink. He said, go and get your husband. And she said, I don't have a husband. And he said, you answered truthfully. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now is not your husband. Did you ever think about that story? What does that mean? You think she'd been divorced 5 times? Pardon? We really don't know. She could have been widowed 5 times. She could have been divorced a couple of times and widowed a couple of times. Pointed that out? Okay. That's true. It was not a correct situation. But she went and got and told everybody else that here's a man that's claiming to be the living water. You got to come and hear this man. I've heard nobody ever talk like him. They came, and many that day believed based on what Jesus was talking about and saying. Isn't that sort of remarkable to us? You read down 12 through 14. The rest I say this, and this is Paul speaking, not the Lord. If any brother has a wife who is not a believer and she is willing to live with him, he must not divorce her. And if a woman has a husband who is not a believer and he is willing to live with her, she must not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband has been sanctified through his wife, and the unbelieving wife has been sanctified through her believing husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. Does that strike you as sort of remarkable there in that statement? Should we have an unbelieving husband or wife? They would have unclean children? Doesn't that strike you as a little odd or strange for that statement to be made? Paul's saying that it matters not whether one is a believer or both are believers. Your children are still clean. He's not condemning these kids. They were produced out of love. They are clean. They are innocent. And that's just like what's been taught in everywhere else in the Bible. You do not inherit the sins of the father or the mother. You stand for your own sins. Does that make sense? No. Party to. Yeah. I tend to think that's sort of what it is. Now, that sort of begs another question. I'm sorry, my mind just gets warped. I got this woman here. I love her dearly. She loves me dearly. I profess my love to her. She professes her love to me. And I say, I want to be married with her. Me and her both agree. Is that a marriage? Do I have to go before a preacher? Do I have to go before a minister? Do I have to go down to City Hall to a magistrate to have it? Now, by state laws and federal laws, I got to do that to be legal. We're supposed to obey the laws of the land. I have to do it. But so my professing love to her and her to me, that's a marriage in our eyes, but not in the laws of the land. Does that make sense? Yep. Yeah, the spouse cannot sign for the other spouse or give up or do anything and cannot be held liable for their debts, except after a certain period of time. What, 7 or 11? Yeah. There's a lot of states that got a different laws. Unfortunately, here about 10 years ago, I used to drive a bus for a retirement community. And the average age of our resident was 84. Average age of the 300-some residents we had was 84. We're talking old. Okay? No. Now, I'd listen to them when I'm driving the bus around. I hear them talking. And when I'm out around social, I was not close to their age since I was only 60. I was still a young pup to them. But at the same time, they confided their conversations in me. You know the biggest problems they had? Women marrying the men in the retirement community, because what happens? A woman has got her former husband's pension and Social Security, usually, because the women during that period of time didn't work. She marries another man, so if he's only making $3,000, she's making $3,000 from. You join them together, they have to live off to him. There is a penalty for having get married again, because she will lose her former husband, her deceased husband's pension and Social Security. That was the biggest thing that bothered them. The widows there. That really bothered, and that's a penalty for our senior citizens. Yes, because now they will join together and live in the same room so as to share incomes together and have a better life. So we are forcing senior citizens into a life of sin. You ever think about it that way? That's scary. That if my grandparents, my mom and dad, if they were alive today, that's pretty much what they would have to do if one of them died and they wanted to remarry. Yep.